Today is the second live of many lives that are about to happen on this series, and I'm so glad that you're there. Thank you very much for joining me. It is so special to have you there. I remember when I went to go see The Weeknd in concert once, he was like, "Where are my day ones?" And if you were watching this, you are definitely a day oneer, even though this series has been around for about 2 years. But every time you start something new, it always feels like day one. And yeah, it is just so exciting to be able to share with you in the moment as I'm going through this process of creating a Filipino American creative. And today, what I would like to talk with you about is last week, I alluded to a story I wanted to share with you about how during my time away while I was recovering from burnout, I realized that I don't have to plan every single moment. And that was a part of what caused burnout, is that I was planning every single moment. And something that happened while I was on my recovery, I took all of April off, is what I call the Vegas incident. Or incidents, as I should say. But it actually wasn't a Vegas incident. I will actually update this and show you with my pens. It was a Vegas coincidence. Now, I don't necessarily believe in coincidences, but they seem to happen to me all the time. And I'm like, wow, how did that all somehow come together? And it just miraculously does. And what happened in Vegas, actually, the reason why it's called a coincidence is because I could not have done this incident without somebody else. Like, this is definitely a one plus many people type of thing that tends to happen. And what I want to share with you is that when I was in my recovery time during burnout, I reached out to a very good friend of mine. Her name is Val. And I met her along this journey of Filipino American creative. And she has been sort of like my, how do I call her? My spiritual sage. Meaning that every time I've needed some sort of like remembrance of just how deep this all goes and how we're all connected and how beautiful and spiritual this journey is, as well as all of the learning and the factual, head information, there's this spiritual side to it. And she's definitely that person that represents that for me, because there's just so much wisdom that comes from this human being and so much that I learn from every time I get a chance to be around her and get to speak with her. So we hadn't been in contact for a while. I actually got to see her for my birthday last August, and then come around to this past March, end of March, beginning of April, I was like, I need some Val in my life again. And so I reached out to her and I was like, hey girl, how's it going? I'm going through some things. Can we, talk about it? So we were texting back and forth, and we had tried to connect on the phone, but because our schedules are very busy, it just wasn't working. It was within about a week span that I was like, okay, let's chat. And then on a Friday, I texted her and I was like, hey girl, what's your weekend like? Let me give you a call. And she's like, well, actually, I can't talk until Monday because I'm going to be in Las Vegas. And I was like, are you kidding me? You're going to be in Las Vegas? Because I'm going to be in Las Vegas this weekend as well. And so, we went back and forth a little bit, and I was like, okay, well, we definitely have to meet up. If you can come and find me on the Vegas Strip, I'm going to be at the Wynn. I would love to see you. Or if I need to come and find you, I will definitely go do that. Anyways, out of pure coincidence, Val and I ended up in Vegas together. And what's really crazy about it too is that like I said, we hadn't been in contact for several months, and just miraculously, as I had reached out to her several days before, both her and I were going to be in one of the craziest cities in the entire US and entire world, I would say, for that matter. It all kind of came together, and we were able to actually be together in the same place and have that conversation that I was really, really needing. And the reason why I had reached out to her was because I needed to feel like I wasn't so alone on this journey of like, why do I feel like everything is so hard? Burnout is weird because it's not like you just don't feel like doing something. It's like, it really is guttural. It's like you just can't, you just had it up to here and everything feels wrong and nothing feels like where you're headed. And she was one of those people that I was like, okay, I need to have somebody around me. And she just, in that time that we were together in Vegas, we we had a beautiful conversation where she just lathered me with all kinds of wisdom that connected me back to, just how beautiful it is to have friends who have a deeper understanding of what all of this is about. Not only on a spiritual level, but also just the fact that she's Filipina and that she's also on her own journey of discovery. And in sharing that with people, wants to help people heal through that understanding of our shared history and heritage. So as we were talking, she's like, oh yeah, by the way, the reason why I'm here is because I'm actually meeting up with a girlfriend. Her name is Ruby. And I was like, oh, is this one of the girlfriends that I've been seeing you like hang out with on Instagram? I was like, oh my gosh, yes. Cause like every time I see her with her girlfriends and she's posting stories about their beautiful trips together, or they're doing vision boards, or they're just hanging out. This group of gals that my friend Val hangs out with, just, they seem like such amazing, amazing women. It's really like just this community of like-minded souls, depth, just they have all the things, and I was like, gosh, I'd really love to, as I'm watching her on Instagram, like I would really love to be a part of that, and so every time I see her stories come up, I'm like, oh, cool, I get to be part of it just by like observing. But then suddenly she's like, oh yeah, by the way, one of those girlfriends is actually here, and that's the reason why she ended up in Vegas that weekend. And she's like, I'm going to get together with her. I invited her over to the Wynn to have, so I was like, I invited myself. I'm like, we have to get together. I want to meet this girl. And so it was just so beautiful to have all of these amazing coincidences, or what people call coincidences, happen in just the most random of places, and something that I could never have planned for or even wished for. And it's just all like exactly what it was that I needed: the companionship, the friendship, the newness, but also like the understanding of like going, just knowing each other for several years, but then also meeting this new friend was just so wonderful. Anyways, the reason why I tell you about that story is because, not only because of just how wonderful it is to just trust that things happen the way that they're supposed to happen. And it's because during that time together, the three of us sat down, we really got into, because Ruby's also Filipina, and we really got into Filipino identity and what's moving us in that moment, and how it affects our professional lives, how it affects our personal lives, how it affects our health, our relationships with not only friends but with our family, with our parents. We all have this shared collective experience, of course, in our own unique way, but at the same time, like, it's a collective experience. As a Filipino, you have a collective experience, whether it's direct or indirect, just the fact that we all share the same history, that we were all colonized around, at the same time. And, and what's interesting too, is that like that not only impacts our community, but also impacts the way that we interact with other communities. And in those conversations, there was one particular topic that, as I was going back to my girlfriends, Ruby and Val, I was like, okay, so what do you remember from our conversation? Because we also had a few cocktails. So I was like, okay, let me just make sure that I remember exactly what we were talking about. And one part of that conversation that Ruby brought up is she was like, oh yeah, I remembered that we were talking about crab mentality. Now, crab mentality is something that I feel Filipinos today still kind of don't want to talk about. It's something that everybody's like, ooh, yeah, it happens, and it's a not so great thing. And yeah, we can just like, not really talk about it unless it's like happening. And then we talk about it with each other as it's happening. But then as an overall topic that I feel is important to look at and talk about, because it happens so often in our community, this is something that I feel should be shared and should be, just kind of like looked at and brought to light. And the reason why I bring this up today is because in that conversation, I remember that I can't remember exactly what led us to talking about crab mentality, but I said it, and I remember looking at both of my girlfriends who, they looked at me, they were like, at first they were like, what are you talking about? I was like, crab mentality. And they were like, what? And it was just so wonderful in that moment to go, oh, they don't know what this is because it's not happening to them it's like something that hasn't either happened to them or hasn't happened to them recently, or, or just something that is so apparent that it's like a big topic of discussion for them. So that was in a way a good thing, because it's like, okay, well then that means that maybe it's just not happening to them, and it's not happening as often as maybe I remember it when I was growing up, or when, I was in my 20s and in my 30s. And we started, let me first explain what exactly crab mentality is, because, I'm talking about how it's like something that we don't like to talk about in our communities and all of that. And crab mentality, as it appears in the Filipino community, is it alludes to this metaphor of when you have a big pot that's boiling or starting to boil, and you put crabs in it, and they're all there, and they're, suddenly realizing that something is very wrong and that they're being boiled alive. They will start to pull each other down in order to try to get out of the pot. But the unfortunate part about it is that there's no getting out of the pot. They're all stuck in there together. And so instead of working together to, find a solution or whatever, whatever crabs can do, they instead pull each other down and end up all getting boiled alive. And so that unfortunate metaphor, and very dark metaphor, is unfortunately associated with things that happen in the Filipino community, where someone is feeling like they're trying to achieve something, or they're trying to do something big, or they're trying to create something either for themselves or for their community. For example, they're trying to get ahead in their professional lives. And crab mentality will crop up when somebody else tries to bring them down, either through rumors or by actually, circumventing them and trying to just prevent them from moving forward. And this is something that a lot of Filipinos experienced as the person who's receiving crab mentality. And then I also think that there is a level of committing to it and actually doing the act of it. And I don't know, it's like sometimes there's malice behind it, because we're human, right? It's like, oh, I want what that person has, so I'm going to try to get it from them. But then also there's just, I know some people who see things happening and they're like, well, it could be done better, or it could be done differently. And unfortunately, that also could be seen as a way of enacting crab mentality, because they're not wanting to push forth the efforts of what that person is doing. So sometimes it can happen, again, through malice, but then sometimes it just happens because people have a different way of wanting to do things. And I think what the unfortunate part about the Filipino community is that as that's happening, none of us are brought forward. None of us can progress. None of us can advance forward. As a community, as a group of people together. It's like oftentimes what happens too with groups is that groups will start to create something and they'll start to build something, but then they'll break off, because it's like a version of crab mentality, right? Where it's like, okay, I need to break off and do my own thing, but then they start over again, and then this other group starts over again, but then none of them can ever come together in order to build together. And I think that's the reason why I wanted to bring that up today, is because I just feel like, well, there's so much beauty in creating something together. There's so much beauty in being able to collaborate and to support one another, even if it's a different vision of what it is that you want, just by holding space and telling somebody, yeah, you know what you are trying to do is good for all of us. I see the bigger picture, and I don't necessarily need to take that from you and benefit for myself and diminish or do away with what it is that you're trying to build. So I think just being aware of the fact that this has been a part of our fabric as Filipinos, and just recognizing it and recognizing when it's happening, and trying to just do better and to do different, And I think that's also the other thing too I wanted to mention, why I was so amazed that my gals Val and Ruby were like, what is that? Is because that was something actually that Ruby brought up, is that she doesn't feel that crab mentality happens as much in the younger generation. And I actually think that that's true to a certain extent. And the reason why I say to a certain extent is because I have heard of examples of it happening, of younger generations, young people, early 20s, in their teens, trying to create something, and then a similar situation happens that, can be deemed as crab mentality. But I really do agree that because of social media, because we're able to share each other's stories, and we're able to uplift each other in a different way, and not feeling like, oh, this is my secret to be Filipino and nobody else understands it or knows about it. Like now we all understand what it means to be Filipino, how great it is, and that we're celebrating, our nuances. And it's, yeah, I think, we still have a long road ahead just because this is so much a part of like where it is that we've come from. But at the same time, it gives me a lot of hope to see groups of people like Val and her girl Ruby coming together with other like-minded Filipinas, also other Asians, other people of other ethnicities, whether they're Asian or not, Filipino or not, coming together and doing things like, the vision boarding, or like the three of us coming together and having these conversations, I think is a part of breaking down and doing away finally with something that unfortunately has been a part of our identity, this crab mentality that doesn't serve anybody. So that was the Vegas coincidence or incidents that I wanted to share with you. Was just this beautiful coming together that I had that, again, was just in a way divinely thrown together for the benefit of all of the people that got to experience that, Ruby and Val, just being able to make a new friend, being able to nourish a current friendship and then build from there. And I see that they have joined as well. Hey girls, thank you so much for your comments. I got to see them as they popped up. It was just so wonderful to share that experience with you. And thank you for allowing me to share that on this live today. That's it for this live episode. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up. Share it with people if it moves you, if you want to like dive deeper into like what experiences you may have had with crab mentality, or if you also think that it doesn't happen, or, if you've got a question or something, just throw it in the comment. I'll take a look at it, and I'll, if I've got a question that I can answer, I'll do that in the next live. But I do want to give just a quick update before I let you go. I did start editing this week, which was quite exciting, to pull my big fat orange hard drives out of their dusty place in my cupboard and to start going through some of these interviews that I hope to share with you very soon. Also want to congratulate those who put together the celebration for the Larry Itliong Unity Park that opened in Delano over the weekend. Oh my gosh, I'm seeing things come across on Facebook, and it just, the people that were there, Cynthia Bonta, who is just an amazing human being, my friend Lonnie Riamos Patubo, who, has taught me all about Filipinos here in Phoenix. He was there. I mean, just so many people were there to celebrate. And it's just so wonderful to see that Larry Itliong's story is getting shared, and I cannot wait. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to drive out to go be a part of the celebration, but I definitely plan on going back to Delano and checking out that park. And then the other thing too that I wanted to share with you is that even though I was like so prideful that I wasn't going to be traveling a bunch, I have planned a last minute trip to Los Angeles this coming weekend. On Sunday, I will be in downtown Los Angeles to take a look at the show Mix Mix. It is a story about a German Jewish young boy who flees Germany during the Second World War and ends up in the Philippines, because by the time that his parents were applying for visas, the Philippines and Shanghai, but the Philippines was the only place that was able to accept them. And I had no idea that there were Jewish people that had fled during that time to the Philippines. But it makes, like, somebody wrote that as a comment in one of my the episodes about my Jewish heritage, my DNA. They were like, yeah, Jews were pretty much being sent all over the world. And I was like, oh my gosh, they went all the way to the Philippines. So this play that I'm going to go check out on Sunday is about one of those stories. And I'm so excited to go see that. And I will probably share a bit of that with you next Thursday. And so my next YouTube Live is going to be next Thursday at 3 p.m. My girl Suzanne was asking me, she's like, why Thursdays at 3 p.m.? And I was like, well, I have this subscription with this thing called TubeBuddy, and it was like, oh, your best lives are at Thursday at 3 p.m. And actually, I read that wrong. The best time for me to post a video is Thursday at 3 p.m. The best time for me to do a live is like Thursday at like 9 p.m. And that's definitely not happening. So I think for now, I'm going to stick with Thursdays at 3 p.m. And I will see you here next week. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you then. Paalam. Goodbye.